Welcome to the Real Comic Heroes Podcast. Your adventure into the world of comic book movies starts here.
Greetings, citizens, and welcome to another adventure of the Real Comic Heroes Podcast. My name's Travis, and Patrick is on assignment tonight, but I am joined by Bubbawheat from the upcoming Fight Club Minute. Welcome.
All right, it's good to be here.
Good to have you. This is kind of an odd one. We're here to talk about a movie that was not originally on our list until you kind of brought it to my attention. I think you just asked, hey, are you guys doing the Gen 13 movie? And I think I said, the what? So I kind of want to kick it off with what made you it's kind of going to be a multi-part sort of thing. Like, what's your history with this? What spurred you to, want to talk about it?
Well, this is like, I mean, my main movie project is I have a site called Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights.
Yeah.
And I started that about almost 12 years ago now. And I did that, and I started watching superhero movies. And I've wanted to seek out pretty much all of the ones that I could find, and I have a much more extensive list than you guys.
Sure.
Although I'm also a little bit more restrictive. I definitely have some, very specific criteria for what I consider a superhero or a comic book movie.
Okay.
And so I don't go to the Bond movies or the spy movies and the adventure movies like Indiana Jones. It's strictly either superhero or based on a comic book. And so I did that for several years, and I started to seek out every time I did some digging, I would find all these different obscure and low budget superhero movies, and I have watched and reviewed over 500.
Wow.
Over the course of the site, and there's still a lot of obscure ones out there that I never got around to.
Okay.
And so this was one of the ones that I found in the first couple of years, and it's whenever I found it and started reading about it, I kind of became obsessed with it for the span of a couple weeks as I watched it and did some digging, because there's not a ton of info about this movie.
Right.
This isn't quite like the Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie.
Sure.
This is a lot more kind of under the radar. And so what I found is that I think it was mostly, I did some refreshing today too. And I think it was mostly the writer director, Kevin Alvieri. And he worked on Batman the Animated Series as a director. He directed 22 episodes. And he worked on the Batman Mask of the Phantasm movie. And so he wanted to do a straight to video project. And he got in touch with Jim Lee, who at the time was working with Wildcat Comics, I believe.
Yeah.
And their biggest property was Gen 13. And so Jim Lee thought this was a great idea. And so they started working on it. And this was the mid 90s. This was just right after Mask of the Phantasm came out. So even though it didn't financially do great, it did really well critically. And so they started working on it. And then I think, I don't know if they needed additional funding or if he was just, looking to get distribution rights, but Jim Lee ended up selling the rights to Buena Vista, who is owned by Disney. And then a couple years later, after the film was nearly finished in 1998, Jim Lee sold Wildcat Comics to DC, which is owned by Warner Brothers,
Right.
and basically the rival to Disney.
Yeah.
And so once Disney found out about this, they decided that they're not going to release it at all, and they just
Right.
shelved the project and canceled everything. And not until 2000 did they do like a very limited home video release in like Australia and I think one or two other countries.
Yeah.
And it's like I read all this and I was just, and I couldn't find it. I think I found more information just doing a quick little digging today. I found like a Reddit post that had a lot of that Jim Lee information, but there's not a ton of information out there. But it's that just like the Fantastic Four movie, it's not that hard to find bootleg copies of this movie.
Yeah, you sent me a link to a YouTube, post with the movie. It's pretty low, it's pretty rough, quality wise. And then today I was just searching for an image from the movie and found someone has taken the movie and run it through some kind of AI program. So it's like an HD remastered AI enhanced version, and it looks better, it's so
then the
yeah,
other thing
it's very
that
available.
blew my mind is, and it's like I knew mostly what I was getting into rewatching it today, but I had forgotten how horny and how violent this movie is, especially for something that was going to be released by Disney, even though like it definitely wasn't going to be a Disney release.
Sure.
It was I believe it was going to be Hollywood Videos.
Okay.
Going to be released under that label, and it was like a straight to video, but still it kind of blew my mind. It's nearly R-rated.
yeah, that's watching it, for this was the first time I had watched it. I don't even know if I was aware of its existence until you brought it to my attention. I was certainly aware of Gen 13 comics. I mean, they were part of that Image Comics, the kind of that second wave of Image Comics boom, the after your Spawn and a lot of the first like Image Comics had come out. This was kind of
they were behind the same comic company was behind the Wildcats, the KTZ Saturday morning cartoon, which I watched that. And the like not specifically, it was like pretty closely related to the team that sold like the rights to the Max MTV cartoon as well.
But yeah, I mean, so I was very familiar with the like the covers of the comics, because this was, they were coming out in like 95, 96, 97 maybe, right when I was 13, 14 years old, and just so the covers to these comics were very eye-catching to someone at my age. And so that's, I kind of just knew it through its reputation for stuff like that. And I mean, just hadn't ever really paid attention to Gen 13 after that. So definitely an interesting watch. And we can get into it. I was a bit surprised how it starts off, and quickly learned, like you said, this is nearly an R-rated movie, and it kind of opens with like a car crash and this family on the run from a military sort of unit, and they end up trying to escape through a river, and the mother is like gunned down, and a real violent bit of animation with blood spurting and all that, and just very like right in front of her kid. Like it was kind of shocking. So it was a bit of a holy shit moment right up right up top, and didn't know what I was in for, but it definitely hooked me, at that point. And we see like, so the mom gets gunned down, then the dad is trying to, I think, protect his kid and like a baby girl, and he kind of starts to like mind Hulk out, it seems, and gives the kid to gives the the baby to the boy and tells him to run. And I was a little unclear what happened to the guy, because he kind of like, he starts to his powers seemed to take over, and I couldn't tell like what he was doing, but
he starts to it is very unclear. He starts to glow. He starts to, like, you see blood coming out of his mouth. His eyes are glowing
yeah.
red, and then he's got like the waves of like power emanating from him.
Yeah. And
But then he gets gunned down.
That's right. Yeah. So it's like I said, I mean it's a hell of an opening, and it kind of the mom getting gunned down, just the way the like the physicality of it, the movements, and some of the stuff that the dad, like some of the body horror kind of stuff of the dad sort of going through a little bit of a change, kind of reminded me of Ghost in the Shell, like some of the animation in that. Especially like there's this big military gunship, looming over him, and so just
I think it also wears its Batman the Animated Series
mm,
uh, um, like inspiration on its
yeah,
sleeve too. I think it does, because it definitely looks more Western
yeah,
animation than anime,
for sure. Yeah,
and
it's yeah,
I feel like it also has like that. Um, I almost feel like it has that like animated on black paper, like
mm,
Batman has, because it's very dark, and
sure.
it wouldn't surprise me if they use that same Batman the Animated Series technique of animating on black rather than clear.
I could see that.
Just
Yeah, yeah.
and it's I think they used a lot of the same animators and
Mm,
the same animation company
probably.
as well.
Yeah, no, it definitely it, like you said, it definitely has that. It's almost like a what if this was an R-rated Batman sort of movie, just similar enough style. It's not quite that Bruce Timm art, but yeah, the some of the body movements and some of the character designs are a little bit, reminiscent of some of that
Not like a full on direct
animated series.
copy, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In the same vein.
mhm.
But we go through a, pretty generic credit sequence, kind of a, you know, something you'd see, maybe in like an X-Men movie in a couple of years, just like fading through DNA and that sort of thing. Nothing earth-shattering here. And then we meet Caitlin Fairchild. I don't know if they say her name right away, but she wakes up in her I guess this is a little unclear because I know she's 18 years old, but I got
Yeah, I'm
this
pretty
is
sure
like
it's her college dorm.
okay, it is college, yeah. But yeah, definitely a dorm of some kind, and she's got this roommate who I think, go out of their way to,
To horn to be
yeah,
horny. Like,
exactly, yeah, yeah,
this is a very horny movie
it
because you're
really is,
introduced to her with like a close up of her butt and legs.
yeah,
She's under the covers, but her legs are sticking out, and it's full on panty shot.
yeah, yeah. So it definitely kind of like let me know right up front, like, oh, okay, they're trying to like push this envelope enough to show like, hey, we can be edgy, or it's they're trying to maybe distance themselves from like this isn't Disney. Like we're being produced by Disney, but this isn't Disney, or this isn't
Mhm.
Saturday morning cartoons, or just trying to edge it up a little bit by including that sort of thing up front, it seemed like. So maybe a little heavy-handed, but you know whatever.
I think it is actually, pretty nice. Like I'm looking at it on the screen, and they do a great job of, it's like getting that odd couple vibe, because like
Oh yeah,
Caitlin's half of the room is like all neat and tidy, and
yeah,
then her roommates, which I don't even remember if she has a name, but her horned up roommates is just like there's books and clothes and
hmm,
stuff scattered all over. Like there's just a ring around her bed of
yeah,
trash.
yeah. And she's talking about like whoever she hooked up with the night before or something like that. And
Yeah, she came in at like 3 a.m. the
yeah,
night before,
yeah.
and
But
so she turned off the alarm so
oh
she could
right, yeah.
sleep in.
Which makes Caitlin late for like some class or whatever. She takes off, and we meet, we get to know Caitlin a little bit, and she's voiced by Alicia Witt, who's been in a bunch of stuff. But it's just kind of a
I best knew her from the Sybil TV show. She
oh
played
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the daughter, Zoe.
Yeah, that's right. Um, I was hit or miss with Alicia Witt as voicing Caitlin here. Sometimes it worked for me, sometimes, and overall, I thought the voice work was probably one of my biggest, complaints about the movie, because for
Mhm.
most of it, it sounded like the voices were coming from nowhere. Like it just, I don't know if it was just the version I was watching had a really bad sound quality, or it just sounded like
Or was the bit that they hadn't finished yet?
could have
So they were
been,
just like
yeah.
using the raw audio. But I
Yeah.
also like I definitely agree with that. And I thought especially Alicia's voice felt very flat to me.
Hmm. Yeah,
Like
it didn't
she
it
felt very like it seemed like she didn't have very much experience with voice acting.
which wouldn't surprise me. I can't think of any other, animated projects that she would have done at this point.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it just didn't sound professionally recorded at some points. So, not like this.
Of
But
course.
we learn, that she's a brainy, a very very brilliant sort of student, very gifted, and kind of like we just talked about the Batman Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero movie, and getting a lot of like Barbara Gordon vibes from Caitlin. I mean, she even kind of looks like her. You could
Mm.
throw a bat suit on Caitlyn here, and she's kind of just Batgirl. But I don't mind the comparison. I think they're definitely going for a type in some ways. Like she's the brainy kid who has no experience with love and that sort of thing. We learn that really quickly, and she comes back to her dorm, and her oversexed roommate is getting it on with somebody. It's like, so again, it's
Well,
like,
before that, like I do like that this setup for them showing how smart she is, and
sure,
also like her personality, because
yeah,
there's this army guy that gives her a pamphlet about the
yeah,
Genesis project, and she's like spacing out reading it, and then she gets called out by the professor, and then she just immediately completely dresses down
yeah,
the professor with all these various facts about
correct
what
sim on,
he's
yeah,
teaching, but is corrects him. Yeah. Like, no, this is all the stuff that we're talking about, but and everything that you were saying was wrong because you were actually getting it mixed up with this, and
yeah,
this. And yeah, that's and yeah, she tries to go back to her dorm, but her roommate is like, again, she's got the door latched and she's having sex with her boyfriend, and she's like, come back in 15 minutes.
yeah. I almost think this would have worked better as, I'm thinking of like the HBO Spawn series. Like I feel like that probably where this should have lived if it was. I don't know if this was intended to go be a TV movie or sort of pilot sort of thing for a series. Certainly by the end of it, I think it's it's prime for a continuation. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it almost seems like it's setting up a series, or at least a sequel. But yeah, just some of the more adult elements make me think like this probably would have worked fine as an HBO series. But um regardless, like Caitlin decides to take this general, up on his offer, and joins, just kind of the next scene is her on some sort of military craft heading out to the desert, and she's uh being like taken off of the plane, and introduced to this, Helga, what's her name, Helga Kleinman, voiced by Cloris Leachman, and it's a very
Mhm.
like caricature, German taskmaster sort of voice, and she's quickly kind of,
Yeah, and she's like overweight too.
oh, of
And she's
course,
like
yeah.
the overweight and kind of manly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and kind of taken, shown around this like military installation. They're not, I don't know if at this point if they're super clear of like what sort of facility this is. They're just kind of, the guy that gave her the pamphlet is just talking about someone of her talents and saying that she, you know, is has the right aptitude for this sort of thing, but they're not really giving away anything.
I think he even mentions her father at that point too.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty clear from, you know, the audience that everybody understands that she was that baby in the opening scene.
Yeah. And then she meets a couple of the other like recruits, I guess. And to me, I mean, the few things that I know about Gen 13 are just like the character names. So, you know, seeing the first one she meets is Grunge, and like he's very like recognizable from the very recognizable from the comics. He's like this, you know, has this big skull wing tattoo on his chest. He, you know, is appropriately named Grunge. He typically wears like a flannel shirt, you know, ripped jean shorts and big like combat boots sort of thing. Just that very like 90s grunge. I mean, that's, you know, the name makes sense. He's voiced by Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And then
he's definitely going for like a, you know, a dumb, like almost surfer dude, bro.
Yeah. Which I get, and one of the things I read that I didn't know about grunge is that his real name is Percival Chang, but he is extremely intelligent and he pretends to be dumb just because he likes giving off the vibe of this free, you know, kind of freewheeling surfer jock kind of vibe that he likes to give off, and maybe it's his way of flying under the radar, you know, not letting people like assume one thing about him but secretly knowing more than they do maybe, but I don't know, you know, don't know how much that plays into the comics at all. It's not really a factor here in this movie. He's never shown to be very intelligent. So
yeah, I think there's just one line in the entire movie where the villain says, "Oh, you're smarter than you look."
Yeah. And we also meet Roxy Spalding, who I know as Freefall as her kind of code name, and just this like
she's like the typical 90s alt rock chick.
Yeah. Short hair, a little bit of pink in her hair. I know typically she wears like a leather jacket, but you know, just nothing.
And she's smoking, she's got the raspy voice. I forget the voice actress's name, but she's a well-known voice actor. She did like the voice of Buttercup from Powerpuff Girls and also Tommy Pickles. Like that was, especially in the third act, I heard a lot of Tommy Pickles coming out whenever she started like screaming and stuff.
Yeah, it's Elizabeth Daily, or E.G. Daily is she's often credited, and she I think is also Timmy Turner from like the Fairly Odd Parents, or that might be Tara Strong. I might be mixing up, you know, voice actors, but yeah, E.G. Daily's been in voice work for, you know, decades at this point, and was Dottie in the Pee-wee's, you know, Big Adventure movie. So yeah, and then they kind of get brought into this like facility and you know, quickly kind of get put through the paces, and we meet another character who I had no familiarity with. His name's Matthew Callahan, and he's got this, you know, very 90s sort of emo-ish blonde haircut and a eye patch sort of thing. But it's a very like typical animation sort of sequence where he's up against some sort of martial arts master and just wipes the floor with them. You know, I feel like I've seen Lex Luthor in the Superman the animated series in a similar scene.
Yeah, I can picture that.
Yeah,
that exact scene.
And even like the Kingpin, I've seen in this sort of same sequence before. Just, you know, surrounded by ninjas and other martial arts people who are just there to test him and be his workout, and you know, just completely destroys them. So same sort of thing here,
the giant martial arts guy gets one good lick at him, and then he starts gloating, and then he that sets him off, and so he uses his telekinetic powers to
Mhm.
break the guy's leg.
Yeah, so first sort of hint at powers, I believe, aside from that opening sequence. So yeah, definitely we know that there's something going on with this Matthew guy, and it took me a minute to realize, because of course in the credits you see Mark Hamill, is credited as Threshold, and it honestly took me a minute to realize that this Matthew Callahan is voiced by Mark Hamill, so I guess he's AKA Threshold, and because he's not doing like a typical sort of Mark Hamill voice, like he's not
Yeah, he's
doing the
doing much more
Joker,
toned down.
yeah. So it's very subdued. But
And we're also introduced to Ivana over the phone.
yeah, Matthew takes a call, sort of video call with Ivana. Yeah, I trying to I can't remember what they're talking about specifically. It might be like the new recruits that are brought in and kind of what their plans are for them, something like
Yeah,
that,
I
I
think he
believe.
mentions that Caitlin seems like a promising
Yeah,
recruit.
yeah. And then we kind of jump into like a training montage sort of thing. It's there are three main recruits, and then there's a bunch of other students as well. And there's one kind of standout that they kind of show a few times. And and I wasn't surprised to see her in this movie a few times, and they call her out later on. But I knew just again from the what little I knew from the comics and reading about Gen 13 in like Wizard magazine, that there's a character called Sarah Rainmaker, and she's
Mhm.
Native American descent, and so a few times in this uh sort of training montage sequence and schooling sort of sequence, you can see her, the Rainmaker character, you can see a few times, and she eventually is like Caitlin's sparring partner when she's
Mhm.
sort of
Reminds me of
sort of at the
American Gladiators with the
yeah, yeah.
with like the giant Q-tip
Hmm.
quarterstaffs.
So I was really kind of surprised throughout this that they really only paired up the three. It's just Caitlin, Grunge, and Roxy. I was surprised that they don't then include. I know there's a character called Burnout who's
Mhm.
just a at first I thought that was Matthew Callahan because the blonde hair kind of looks like the same character design from what I knew, but he's like a fire guy. And then of course uh Rainmaker, who, I mean, those five were pretty much on every cover that I could remember. So I was really kind of surprised that they really just paired the three uh teens up for the entire movie. So
Yeah, I think Burnout has like a background cameo, but I was
okay,
not familiar with the comics, so
yeah,
I wouldn't be able to point them out.
yeah. See, I think at this point the
Then we get the extended shower scene.
well, yeah, because in the sparring match, Caitlin kind of gets knocked to the ground and starts to complain of a headache. That it's kind of you kind of get the sense that okay, something's going on, and yeah, they tell her to go shower up, and yeah, you get this really, I don't know, some of the information that's conveyed in this shower sequence between uh Caitlin and Roxy is good information. I mean, I think it's a good scene, but it's definitely they're going for that sort of eye candy, like innuendo and just uh, I'm
No,
I was
it's weirdly
surprised it was
pervy.
I was surprised it was as subdued as it is. I mean, they make good use of the fog and that sort of thing in the shower room. So
Yeah, it's almost like they went a little bit too far with it, because in a lot of the scene you can barely even see their faces. There's so much
yeah,
fog.
yeah,
But it's clearly just to obscure the nudity,
yeah, yeah,
even though they definitely have, they play around with that, because at one point, like Caitlin is, she suds up, and then of
yeah,
course the suds are strategically placed, but
yeah,
then she's standing there, and then the water is like slowly and making the suds go away. And it does completely go away, but it's still obscured by the fogginess.
Yeah. This movie rides a really strange line of censorship, in a few ways. And there's another one coming up later it's very strange.
Yes.
But we'll get there. But yeah, I mean, so the shower scene is sort of Caitlin and Roxy talking about why they're both there. Caitlin talks about, I think she talks about like wanting to make her father proud, even though she doesn't know her father, but she knows of him. She asks Roxy what she's doing here, and they have a back and forth about Caitlin was led to believe that everyone here was of some sort of military descent, that everyone's parents were in the military, and Roxy shoots that idea down. But I don't remember if like Roxy has a solid reason why she thinks Caitlin's wrong, because I thought she even said that she didn't know who her dad was. So but Roxy says that her mom wanted her to come to this program because she was headed down a bad road because of some boyfriend or something like that. So I don't know. It's a decent little scene. The nice little punctuation on the scene is like at the start of it, Roxy says, she takes out a cigarette and she's like, well, this is the one place I can smoke because there's no cameras in here. And then the scene has a nice little button on it where it transitions to, CCTV kind of footage of the two of them being observed. And so it's like, okay, if they're observing these, young women in the shower, like what else are they doing? And like, just clearly there's a moral, line here that's just not being observed at all. So
yeah, there's something questionable going on, to say the least.
Yeah. And it's quickly like the next scene is Caitlin like studying, I think, in her bedroom, and they quickly like knock her out. They pour, some gas comes in through the vent and she's just knocked out. And some stormtroopers come in and throw her in like a tube kind of coffin sort of situation. And
like a cryogenic tube.
yeah, reminded me a lot of Alien Resurrection. We just covered that a couple months ago. And some of the some victims were placed in these like cryo tubes. Kind of reminded me of that. But and it oddly kind of reminded me of Dark City, another movie we just covered. Because it's like you get the hint that like as they're wheeling Caitlin through the hallway, it's like they're also wheeling Roxy and Grunge and I think several other people. They bring them all to this room, and you get the idea that this is probably like a nightly occurrence, or at least maybe not nightly, but it's a regular occurrence that they are taking them at night and doing whatever they want with them. So super creepy. Interesting though. I was didn't know where this was gonna go, but you get Helga and Ivana and Matthew are all kind of the three people in like the control booth, kind of monitoring this sort of whatever this experiment that they're doing is. But they've got all the teens like in their little chambers, and they're like flooding their little tanks and putting things in their noses.
I don't think we've talked about what like Ivana's look either.
Oh, sure.
Like she is very like a classic noir villainous. She's got like the long black hair, like the night. She looks like she's gonna go out to a nightclub.
Yeah.
She's got
she looks like Lily Munster or Morticia Adams, just has that sort of femme fatale, sort of look. And I guess backing up even further, we learned that this Gen 13 program is like they're trying to this trio of Ivana, Matthew, and I guess Helga are trying to awaken a dormant Gen they call it the Gen Active or Gen Factor or something like that.
Yeah, they want to make them go Gen Active.
Yeah, essentially, it's like the X-Men. They're trying to awaken their powers and turn them into weapons, or
I mean, eventually, it's more like the first Deadpool movie.
Sure, yeah,
Like
that's a
they're trying to
good
activate their
comparison. Yeah,
their mutant genes.
right. Yeah. So yeah, it's them kind of, I guess, putting their bodies through these sort of
Stress test.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to think about it, and like to elicit that those powers. They assume that all these candidates are candidates are probably have dormant powers, and yeah, they're just trying to see
I don't know for sure.
who develops.
I got the impression that they were all they're all children of Gen 12.
Right. Yeah. Believe at this point this sequence, I think, is interrupted by someone showing up in a Harrier jet, like just showing up to this military, installation. Says like a Mayday sort of situation. He lands, and the Ivana escorts him in, and it's this guy. Is it Jack Lynch or John? Yeah, Jack Lynch, voiced by John Delancey from Star Trek Next Generation and Breaking Bad, and I mean several other things. But he looks like Ra's al Ghul from Batman the Animated Series, and I read that his inspiration in the comics was Clint Eastwood and Wolverine. So it's kind of that like gruff, severe type of guy. But ultimately, we'll find out like he's kind of the good guy, even though he looks very like mean and scary, and you think he's going to be the bad guy.
Nick Fury eye.
Yeah.
Just minus the eye patch. He's got the scar, and it's like the one eye doesn't have a pupil.
Right. And at some point, like later on, he'll say that he was part of Gen 12, and it makes me wonder what his powers are, but they never reveal that, like, if and what those powers are. So I'd be curious to find that out. But he's definitely like an unwelcome sort of presence, and he knows that. He knows he's he's here to snoop around, and they know he's here to snoop around. So it's kind of like they just try to usher him to the side and tell him, okay, you can leave in the morning. And it's sort of an odd premise for him to be here. I mean, he works with some government agency, and it seems like he could just say like, yeah, I'm just here for a routine, surprise inspection or something like that. But they kind of go with this ruse of him being here under whatever.
I think his presence really confuses the whole like villain plan.
I've
watched this movie twice, even though it's been like 10 years apart. But
sure,
I couldn't exactly tell you exactly what the whole villain backstory or what the villain plan and how all of that is supposed to work.
What I guess doesn't matter where I talk about this. Like what I gathered from reading, just like after watching the movie, I read the Wikipedia like synopsis of the movie, and it says that Ivana and Matthew's plan is to basically overthrow the government with this team of superpowered beings that they'll farm out of this place. So, but why they're here in the first, I don't know what they're saying they're doing, because they don't say that like we're trying to make people with superpowers, because they know that that's illegal.
Like once you know the whole story, because it feels like that's clearly what they're doing, and that seems like that's what they're supposed to be doing,
right?
But at the same time, they're doing it secretly.
Like what does the government think you're here trying to do? What is the cover story that you have for this place? So it's all very it's probably not one of the things you pay a lot of attention to as you watch it, but it's definitely there. It's like, what's the motivation here with? But anyways, like at this point, there's like a Caitlin.
We
We
get
start
another
to get like a
flashback.
flashback. Yeah. So we
Mm.
get a little bit more of that opening sequence of like the kid running away from the sort of the military people that are chasing after him, and he goes down a waterfall. And
And I think this
ultimately,
point is where most people would realize that the boy
yeah,
is Matthew,
right.
because like he injures his eye at
Yeah, he
the end
comes
of
out of the
it.
water holding covering his eye. So it's like, oh, okay. So he's the brother of Caitlin, big, shocking, sort of twist. I'm surprised they kind of give that away here. But it's, I think it works because I think, if you're,
I think it's supposed to be subtle enough
yeah,
that they think the audience won't get it, but
yeah,
I'm pretty sure the first time I watched it, as soon as I saw that it's like, oh, blonde hair.
yeah,
That's definitely that's definitely the Matthew character
right.
is the brother.
Yeah. And she's introduced. They're like, I think the next scene is kind of at the cafeteria sort of thing, the mess hall, and she's introduced to this Jack Lynch, who's just kind of loitering, having coffee, probably waiting to meet Caitlin. It seems like, but they run into each other. She has like a weird moment in the food line where she momentarily like hallucinates that her food is like alive or something.
Yeah,
So
it's like a Lost Boys moment.
okay,
You're
yeah,
eating worms. You're
yeah,
eating
yeah,
worms, Michael.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, so she sits down with him, and then her other two friends, join, and so it's just a little moment there, but she kind of gets to meet Jack, and we're not
I also
sure
just
what to think
noticed.
about him and all this.
Yeah, I just noticed a weird animation choice that
Mm.
they they choose not to animate the blink on Lynch's bad eye. So
Oh,
only his good eye blinks.
interesting. I think at this point, oh, there's another like there's a moment where Caitlin is still complaining about these headaches and things like that, and she's in her room again and starts to, I think, she even gets to the point where she gets sick and then starts to wander around looking for an infirmary. And this is where she will eventually like find a room and start to poke around, and she finds an open computer terminal and starts to like, oh, I don't remember how she comes across her
Yeah.
father's name.
Yeah, I felt
um
like this part of the movie was incredibly convenient.
yeah, yeah,
It's like, oh, she's sick, so she's just wandering around looking for the infirmary, but it's a maze.
yeah, yeah.
So she wanders into this open terminal where they whoever just left, because you see like a lit
Cigar.
cigarette or cigar, just happened to be looking at her
Yeah.
father's file, and then so she starts looking more into her father's file
Yeah.
to get all
i
this information.
I feel like they should have had Jack Lynch should have been smoking a cigar at some point, so that we would think like, oh, maybe he left this terminal open. But in the scene just before this, when it's Matthew and Ivana in a control room, he's smoking a cigar. So if you're paying attention, it's like, oh well, that's Matthew is the one who left this kind of these I think she's even walking past an open door and a light turns on, so that's what leads her into the room. So it's like someone's leading her here, someone wants her to find thing. And oh yeah, she comes up to this computer terminal and her father's name is just like highlighted on the screen. So of
Mm.
course she looks into it and starts to dig around in her father's file and find out like he was part of Gen 12 and uh, did, pretty terrible things for the country, and during Vietnam and various other, sort of missions or whatever. And then she's interrupted by, you think it's going to be like Matthew Callahan or maybe Lynch, but she's snuck up on by Grunge and Roxy, and so they have a little, she kind of freaks out, and then there's jokes about they do this every night. They go looking for food or whatever. So
yeah, he's sneaking food, and she's finding a blind spot to smoke.
And this is kind of where it starts to the pace starts to pick up for sure. There was a one little hint when she was when Caitlin was stumbling through the hallways looking for the infirmary, where she leans against a metal rail and kind of crushes it with her hand, but she doesn't realize it. So then they're here, and then the trio gets interrupted by a stormtrooper. And one thing, like at this point on, like all these stormtroopers are not just like, carbon copy blank templates. We're used to like Star Wars characters, stormtroopers being just like no personality whatsoever. They're all just, hey, you there, put your hands up. These guys are all like sociopath, assholes. They're all like itching to beat up on these kids, and he basically says like, just give me a reason to, I can shoot you if I want. And I mean, it was surprising to get this much character in all of the stormtroopers from like that we see like from here on out. They're all just kind of these, dickhead kind of jerks. But this is, the scene that Caitlin
A-cab.
then, what's that?
A-cab.
Oh, yeah, right. But then Caitlin kind of hulks out, and I couldn't remember what Caitlin's power was or what her deal was. But she physically like grows several, like, I mean, I would say
she basically turns
a
into
foot
She-Hulk
taller.
without the green skin.
Yeah.
Yeah, she
And
grows a foot taller. Her breasts grow about 3 cups bigger.
And here's the other weird bit of censorship. They go to the extreme of showing her breasts get bigger, her nipples start to poke through the shirt, and then the whole shirt rips off because she's getting so, so much bigger. And then she's standing there for like a second, exposed breasts, but there's no nipples. And it's the weirdest, like, I don't know why.
Again, it feels like it's an unfinished. Like I think that for censorship, they probably either would have animated her arms to cover the nipple portions better, or it would have been cropped a little bit closer, so that they would have been just off screen. But because this is like an unfinished cut, I mean, it feels finished mostly. But I think it's just because this is, not 100% completed. It's like 98% completed. That they would have maybe done that one extra pass to fix that moment in that scene.
Yeah, it was just it's a weird thing to more or less include, to have her exposed like that, but then not, it's like anatomically she's intact a frame before when the shirt's there, and then the shirt's gone. It's like, oh, something's missing. But it's just bizarre. But regardless, I mean, and I guess this was a nod to, so many of the covers. I mean, even some of the covers I can remember, like she's often in, either a bathing suit or like a G-string thong sort of thing, and bra and panties, or in a shirt with various, states of like, it being shredded and falling off of her practically. And it was kind of a nod to that sort of thing. And I guess in the comics, they'd get into fights or whatever, and inevitably her clothes would get almost destroyed just to try and, so it's just that sort of that 90s sort of over sexifying the female characters, that sort of thing. So
yeah,
I guess that's kind of what they're going for here.
This was another scene that kind of bothered me on just like, I could see what they were going for, but visually it didn't quite work for me because, she does grow like a full foot taller, her breasts grow a lot larger, and her extremely loose nightshirt gets
Yeah,
shredded because she outgrows it, even though that doesn't make sense based
sure.
on, I feel like she would have had to have been another foot and a half taller
Mm,
and in order to for that to make sense,
yeah,
or her shirt should have been animated previously a bit tighter because
right.
it
Yeah.
feels like one of those oversized night shirts, and
Hmm. Yeah.
realistically that feels like it definitely would have stretched enough that it might have been tight, but it wouldn't have completely shredded.
Yeah.
And then she also asks for Grunge offers her
Yeah. Yeah.
his shirt, and he's built like a tank,
Yeah.
and he looks like, he's still twice as wide, and
Yeah.
she only looks at this point like she's, just a few inches taller than him. And she's like, oh, this shirt is,
It barely
very
fits.
tight, it
Yeah.
barely fits. and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like, just looking at the character designs, it's like, how does that not
Yeah, he's
fit?
as wide as a fridge, and
Mhm.
yeah, she's very thin, yeah. It's it's just for male gaze, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. But we do get like some really great action. I mean, she hulks out and just brutalizes some of these guards that come in, and just gets real violent. So it was
Yeah, I think
pretty
this
good sequence, I think. Um,
Yeah, I think the action sequences in general are
yeah,
pretty well done in this movie. That,
I would agree.
it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
it is like very generic because it is like, uh, she just feels like She-Hulk basically. She
Yeah.
just has super strength for the most part. It doesn't really, like, her powers don't really stand out, even though she
Yeah.
has like some sort of telekinetic resistance. Like, she's
Mm,
not fully telekinetic, but later on in the
yeah.
movie, she can like resist her brother's
Right.
telepathic attacks.
Yeah. I kind of wonder, something you said there reminded me, like, with how good the action sequences are. And I wonder if this is kind of the the same crew that would have been doing, Batman the animated series, and then probably also the Superman animated series. Like, if this movie is kind of them getting to take the reins off, and so, okay, let's actually do some animated action sequences where, like, Superman is, has all of Superman's strength, but has to fight robots, in order
Mhm.
to throw a punch. You can't throw a punch against a flesh and blood sort of character. But here we can have Fairchild, like, punch somebody in the face, a stormtrooper in the face, and to the point where she caves the helmet in and his brain explodes, that sort of thing. It's like,
Well,
maybe
I
it's
think
kind
in
of
this
them, like,
fight, yeah,
yeah.
I don't think that happens in this
Well,
fight because
yeah, yeah,
like,
that's kind of an
she
example.
because the I think they do purposefully, at least at this point, the only guard that dies was
Yeah,
shot by another guard. It was friendly
yeah,
fire, and so,
yeah,
and it is bloody. Like, he shoots, one of the bullets goes, breaks the glass in the helmet, and we see a spray of blood.
yeah,
And the other characters do comment about how one of them's dead.
yeah. But I just mean, in general, the movie as a whole is kind of them getting to do things that they couldn't do for other animation, projects. But
Mhm.
and I was kind of surprised that we, in this sequence, like, Grunge and Roxy don't develop powers. They were also under stress in the moment, but we have to wait a little while before we get them. They retreat to like
That's
a
like,
locker
they
room where
definitely
they
push that to like the last
yeah,
minute.
yeah. I kept waiting, like, okay, when are they? Yeah, I kept waiting for them to power up, and yeah, I was surprised at how late in the game it finally comes. But they hide out in like a locker room. There's some, shenanigans in the locker room vent, or the vent where they're hiding. He's Grunge is trying to hold in a fart. It's gonna give him away or whatever.
Yeah, that's that's like the a weird bit of juvenile humor. And
Yeah,
yeah, I did notice that, whenever Matthew does come in to the carnage of the scene, he does pick up that cigar that
yeah.
was in the ashtray and lights it up.
Hmm. Yeah, so the guards find them. Eventually, the guards find them in this locker room. Caitlin is now suited up in an outfit that was kind of their training, their sparring outfit. And I guess the one she's wearing is was Helga's. So it's a maybe meant for someone, physically a little larger. So it fits her, obviously just like a bathing suit. She looks like a swimsuit model. So
Yeah, and we did see Helga wearing that
yeah,
outfit in
yeah,
the scene with the three of them talking.
yeah. She kind of stood out a little odd in that sequence, but I guess it was just setting up that's why this outfit is available.
Check off swimsuit.
Yeah, yeah. When the stormtroopers kind of attack, someone chucks in a grenade, and Caitlin sort of shields the others from the blast. And then when the smoke clears, they just say, like the guards say, that we've got Roxy and Grunge, but the other one's completely gone, or something like that. And someone says, "Oh, something big went through this wall," and then we find out that Caitlin like got blasted through the wall and somehow ended up in like the garbage kind of dump outside the facility, which kind of leads to a there's a I don't know if it's funny, but it's an odd like Star Wars reference. She wakes up down in
Well,
this like
it
trash
did make
heap.
me laugh.
Yeah, yeah. She wakes up in like the trash heap, and there's these two like stormtrooper guards like flying these personal, I don't know what you'd call them, like personal kind of mech suit kind of.
They almost look like Slave One flying upside down.
Kinda, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's like a personal slave one. Um, but one of them over the radio calls the other one Blue Leader.
Yeah, he's like
And
Blue Leader 1 to Blue Leader 2.
yeah,
And then the
yeah,
other guy's like, knock it off with this Blue Leader crap. What do you think this is, Star Wars?
yeah. It's like, hey, Mark Hamill's in this, get it? But then I also kind of think like her being in the trash heap is kind of a maybe a nod to like, oh, where'd she go? Oh, she went down the trash, down the trash chute or whatever. But yeah, this leads to them finding her, and another good action sequence. It's her taking on these guards in these little vehicles, and she kind of gets to see what she can do. There's one beat where she's just running, and one of them says, I think she's going like 60 miles an hour or something like that. So they're kind of racing to try and keep up with her at one point, and they're firing at her and firing rockets later on. And yeah, she just one by
I
one
definitely
kind
like
of.
the moment where they capture her with the net, and then the guard's like, oh, she's heavy, she weighs a ton,
Yeah,
and she's like dragging on the ground, and then she's able to situate herself to where she stops it.
yeah.
She puts her feet out, and then she stops it with a rock, and then smashes the ship on the ground.
Mm-hmm. And then the next one she takes out by basically running ahead of it, climbing up a rock, and then by the time it catches up to her, she's holding a boulder over her head, and she chucks the boulder, and it just like literally crushes the pilot. Like, so it's a at this point, yeah, it's like, okay, she
Yeah, the
is,
gloves are off.
yeah, exactly, she is killing these guards, and but I mean, they're trying to kill her, so, or at least subdue her. And then you get
Well,
her.
there's definitely live rounds. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they kind of go back and forth between non-lethal capture and just flat out shooting at her.
Then we get Caitlin. This robot shows up, and then you find out pretty quickly it's a Helga bot. Like, Helga is piloting this robot, and
It looks a little bit like a sleeker Big Daddy.
What's that from?
Fallout, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just kind of, yeah, it's like a big mech suit sort of thing. But I guess she destroys one, and then another one pops up, and that's the one that Helga's in. And Helga tries to like talk her down, talk to her for a second, and then says like, "Oh, you were my prized pupil," and she's even like, tears are coming down her face as she's about to try to crush Caitlin with a boulder.
Yeah, she's like, you were my prize people, but now I have to destroy you.
Yeah, yeah. But then when she goes to smash her, like throws her off balance, and Caitlin's able to, deflect her attack, which throws her off guard, and yeah, she sends Helga like tumbling down this hill. And I was surprised that then like Caitlin kind of goes up to the fallen, Helga and rips the canopy off of it and kind of gets to see Helga's kind of last moments.
Well, I got the impression that she saw that Helga was still alive, and she was like, "Oh, good." And then
Oh,
she's
that could
not
be right.
dead, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
she just it happens off screen, but I
yeah.
think that she just takes her out of the mech suit and it leaves her on the ground.
Okay. I think I was, because I don't think we see Helga again. And so by the time I, was done with this movie and now kind of thinking about it, I was thinking Helga died because she doesn't, appear ever again. But yeah, I think you're right. Like I think she's still alive, but it's just odd that we don't have any closure, there. Um, but then Caitlin gets like a psychic wave. She can feel that like Roxy is being tortured, and so we transition to a scene of Ivana and Matthew just torturing Roxy and Grunge, and
And
kind of
of
taking
course, they have
pleasure in it.
Roxy in a bikini,
Oh, of course.
underwear.
Well, but Grunge is in his underwear too, so
But they let him keep his socks.
yeah, yeah.
And then these like torture devices remind me a little bit of like the Incredibles.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it almost feels like maybe it's a Incredibles is maybe not having a nod to this. Maybe there's some animator that worked on both, but yeah, it's very similar. So I think at this point, Ivana gets a call for something. I think maybe Lynch
Yeah.
is on his way or
Lynch is coming
something.
back. Yeah.
Yeah. She
Because
finds out
I
that
think he must have left, which
yeah,
again, that part is very clear. It's like
yeah,
Lynch left, but now he's coming back with reinforcements. And then
yeah. So
after
it
she leaves, this Matthew starts giving exposition,
yeah,
and we get some more Gen Active moments where
right.
he's explaining that, oh, I believe you, but I'm still going to torture you because I think that's going to make you go Gen Active.
Yeah, so he clearly states he wants these people to develop their powers. Doesn't I don't remember here if he says why he wants them to have powers. He may say that he's going to try and use them to kind of take over, overthrow the government or something. I think he may say that or something to that effect. But yeah, then just we see what kind of a sadist that Matthew really is. Because I think he definitely says something like he was trained by the people that tried to kill him or something like that,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, he was trained by the people that killed his parents.
yeah, yeah. So then we cut back to the desert, kind of the fighter jets are scrambling and troops are mobilizing, and then I believe we get a sequence where Caitlin in the robot, the mech suit, she like returns to the base and tries to pretend that she's Helga. So you get this kind of a comedy moment of her
She's
Alicia
like, my
Witt putting
radio
on
does
a
not work.
yeah. It's I don't know. It's like, does she need the robot suit? Like, couldn't she just have attacked? Like, I don't know that this gives her any advantage, but I guess maybe a slight element of surprise, even though they're instantly like,
Yeah, they're not fooled for a second.
yeah, it's an odd beat. But it was fun to watch. But yeah, she just starts to manhandle stormtroopers, and there's an amazing sequence. I feel like they get her out of the suit pretty quickly,
Mhm.
and I think it's here where she's like they're about to shoot her with like a tank, and she just charges the tank and like shoulder checks it, and I don't know, just animation wise it was really cool. But yeah, she's causing some kind of distraction and everything, and taking out guards and whatnot. And then it cuts back to Callahan, and at some point he pushes, it's like he's kind of alternating between messing with Roxy and Grunge, and then at some point he starts to um, torture Roxy to the point where she might pass out. I can't remember, but that's what triggers Grunge, like triggers his powers to kick in because
He
he's
stops. Yeah, he's a protective.
yeah,
their boyfriend girlfriend. Even
yeah,
though it's not. It's kind of obvious, but not completely obvious up. Before this point. But he also Matthew stops using the devices to torture her, and he starts
oh
using his
right,
telekinesis.
that's right, yeah,
And then Grunge, like we don't necessarily realize it at this point in the movie because he just turns metal, but he's basically becomes Absorbing Man.
yeah, yeah. So at one point, like he initially absorbs the metal that's being used to hold him, so it kind of looks like Colossus. But then he goes kind of berserk and somehow knocks out Matthew, gets you know, wakes up Roxy and everything. Um, and then it's like it all kind of like you've got Caitlin fighting more soldiers, and then Grunge and Roxy end up fighting Ivana for a few minutes. Ivana reveals that she has this I don't know if she's a cyborg. I don't know what Ivana's deal is, but she's got like a robotic hand with these, long fingernails that are like prehensile. She can kind of use them
This
like a whip.
this reminds me of Battle Angel Alita,
Okay.
the the one. I don't remember if it's in the movie the same way, but I know in the comic, like the main like villain that she fights has this kind of power with these these like tentacle like
Yeah.
fingers.
Okay. There's a Lady Deathstrike from the X-Men kind of comics is kind of similar. Um,
Well, it's like a mix between Lady Deathstrike and Omega Red.
yeah, there you go. It's a little like, is it because it's a female character that you're giving her like super powered fingernails? Is that what they're doing? I can't tell if it's like really you had to give the lady character the fingernail weapons, but I don't know. It's kind of fun. I mean, they're used interestingly. Um, the physics
Yeah,
of
it's like
how
the
she's able to like whip things around with them. So
yeah, initially they look like, individual tentacles, but
yeah,
then they braid themselves and then she uses it like a flailed whip.
yeah. But then she ends up fighting, kind of fighting Caitlin and Ivana kind of fight each other, um, and then Matthew wakes up from wherever he was left from when Grunge attacked him, and it cuts back to the fight with Ivana. And oh yeah, the fight with Ivana kind of wraps up in an interesting way because Ivana is like whipping Fairchild around, and then suddenly Grunge, reaches out and absorbs Ivana's like whatever her arm is made of. He absorbs that.
Yeah, she actually has like one of those. I don't remember the exact word for word, but it's one of those like this was definitely written like exposition line. It's like my monofilament
Oh yeah.
metal. It'll cut through steel like butter.
Mm. So then yeah, Grunge is able to absorb that material and then cut her arm off. And then she just she just runs off. And then like the Lynch in his like it kind of cuts to Lynch and his cavalry, they're arriving, and it's become like a kind of an air to ground sort of battle, and all hell kind of is breaking loose. The facility's on fire. um Caitlin, Roxy, and Grunge are all kind of on the run together, and they there's a really fun moment where they intercept like a helicopter pilot who's running off, and they make him fire up the helicopter, and they all pile in, and of course Caitlin is like, now she's like too heavy for this thing to really efficiently take off. So there's some jokes about that that are kind of fun. And I think this leads to one of my favorite moments. It's this helicopter's taking off, and then Matthew shows back up, and it's like then this kind of just becomes Akira, and Matthew's like wearing a cape. It's all like billowing as he's hovering out in front of the helicopter. And he just like, he looks at the helicopter pilot, and the guy's like head starts to crush. He starts to bleed from his helmet. I think he rips the helmet off maybe, but then like all of his flesh is just flayed from his body, and he explodes. It's it's really a great sequence. So it's well animated, I guess. But then
Definitely
so
one of the most memorable
yeah,
moments.
yeah.
Like before rewatching this, that was definitely one of the scenes that I had remembered.
Yeah, I could see why. But it's very Akira. But
And he also
then
reveals that his, I think it's right here that he reveals that his code name is Threshold.
yeah, yeah. I can't remember what he says about that, but then of course the pilot being dead, I can't remember if it I think Threshold then just kind of shreds the helicopter, kind of turns it into pieces basically, and so they all start to fall. And this is where we get, now Roxy develops her powers.
Yeah,
And I
then
know
this is where she sounds the most like Tommy Pickles, because she's
okay.
like, she's like whining and complaining about how, why don't I get my powers? And it's
Yeah.
like it's very Tommy Pickles.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, as she's complaining, while falling, everyone kind of stops moving, and then you realize like, oh, she's encased everyone in like a bubble, like she has gravity manipulating powers. Like her code name I know is free fall. Yeah, she's able
But
to
I figured it was just telekinesis.
okay. I know the Wikipedia for just the generic, Gen 13 does specify that she has gravity manipulating powers. So yeah, I don't know what like I feel like it's kind of like the Sue Storm, like the Invisible Woman's sort of force field bubble sort of powers, without the invisibility and the that sort of thing. But because she does kind of create some force fields a little bit later. um
I like the line that after they land, she like looks and she has the joke line. It's like, damn it, I didn't get the cute body like you did.
oh yeah. Oh yeah, because doesn't she even say something about like she's kind of looking at herself and wondering why her maybe like her breast didn't get bigger or something like that. And then we get a like a face off kind of sequence with Threshold, and he spends a little while like talking to Caitlin.
I think it's basically him monologuing.
Basically, yeah, it very much feels like that, but he doesn't reveal like well, I guess he doesn't know the family connection here. But yeah, he's going over his whole villain plan or something, and then they laugh at him, which is a funny moment that I wasn't expecting. They just flat out laugh at his plan. And then of course that, leads him to like start fighting and everything. And this is where I think you were
Yeah,
kind
because
of talking
that's
about.
what set him off. That's what set him off in that opening scene with him fighting the martial artist. Like he doesn't like being laughed at.
Yeah, yeah. And then he starts to use his like, his mental powers. And I think what you kind of alluded to earlier with her having some resistance, she's able to basically tell him to get out of her head, and is causes like a little feedback, I think, and kind of knocks him off guard. And then her and Grunge just kind of start going to work on him, or trying to attack him anyways. But of course he has like, where she has more the physical powers, he has a little like he's got all the powers more or less. So he's kind of like wiping the floor with him at the start. And then Roxy's able to like put up enough of a defense against him. The beat that I really like though is when the it's kind of like where the fight kind of turns is when Grunge turns himself into stone and tells Caitlin, like, give me a boost or something like that. And so they basically do like the X-Men version of the fastball special, which is where Colossus will throw Wolverine at somebody. So it's kind of like that, where they kind of use grunge as the weapon that Caitlin throws at Matthew. So
and he turns himself to rock this time. So
yeah.
like I know the first time watching this, like I thought that he could just turn himself into metal.
Oh, okay.
Because the first two times he's both turns himself into metal, and then and I think it's easy to miss that it always originates like when he's touching something metal.
Yeah.
But then this time he turns himself into rock, and then you realize, oh, it's because of what he's touching.
Yeah. And I wonder, like earlier he was metal, and I think when he kisses Roxy, he turns back into flesh and blood. And I don't know if that's like because he's touching, human flesh, that's when he turns back into, normal. Like I'm sure he can probably do it at will, but it was just I noticed it. I don't know if it was like intentional, as far as like, oh, because he's touching a person, he turns, back into flesh and blood. I don't know, but
yeah, I'm not sure either. And I also noticed a weird animation thing. Like whenever Threshold throws him into the water, you can see his arm flying across the screen separately.
Oh, weird. Oh, yeah. I think I wondered if that was. Oh, yeah. His arm does break off. They don't. Nothing comes of that.
No, it's like the next time he pops up out of the water, and then he's fully formed again, but just water this time.
Yeah. So yeah, he is able to take on water as a substance, and kind of becomes Hydro Man, sort of. But it's basically like I like the way the team fights together at this point, because Fairchild, like, I mean, Matthew is like charging full power at Fairchild, and she just like uppercuts him. Which kind of like doesn't knock him out, but it really like dazes Matthew. And then Grunge uses the moment to blast him with water, and then Roxy then puts a button on it, kind of, and encases him in like a water bubble, and it just kind of comes down to him being trapped in water for long enough that really, he can't. He still has to breathe, so that really makes a big difference. That I think that's kind of what does him in, because he falls to the ground, and Caitlin just grabs him, and like there's no real fight left in him at this point. And that's when Lynch shows up and kind of, I think I feel like she says something to the effect of that she wants to kill him, or why shouldn't
she says I could twist your head off right now.
That's right. And Lynch, of course, is like, well, he's your brother, gives him the whole backstory of talks about how he tried to save his little sister, and they got separated, and then the military found Matthew, but then Lynch found baby Caitlin, like downstream or whatever. It says that he took her to her uncle to be raised, and then
his name, I did notice that his name was on the like whenever Caitlin was looking up the information about Callahan, Fairchild was on there as well. So that's why the two of them have different last names,
right?
And then it very neatly wraps up. It's like, we're siblings. Did we just become best friends?
Right. Yeah. It's like, oh, now suddenly we can be friends. And I guess
all is forgiven.
Things aren't so bad. And it's a little like you're still a bad guy. You still killed a bunch of people, but it's fine. We'll all get in this big helicopter together and get out of here. Trying to remember how it kind of plays out, but I like that at a certain point we cut back to Ivana, and she's telling people to evacuate, and there's like a moment where so many people have evacuated, and she knows that there's still a bunch more people that need to evacuate, and she's got like this countdown timer. I think it starts at 30 minutes, and she cuts it down to like 5 seconds. Just it's real harsh. I really like that moment. It's just like we're not screwing around with what do you call it, a time bomb that can be deactivated or whatever. She just literally takes it to 5 seconds, and the whole facility starts to blow up. So I really like that moment.
Yeah, already has like all the kids, all the Gen
Oh, that's
13
right.
applicants in cryo tubes in her
Yeah,
plane. Like they're all evacuated, but the guards haven't evacuated yet.
that's right. I forgot about that sequence where and that's where we kind of get a little cameo from Sarah Rainmaker. Because I think like stuff is definitely going on in the facility, and she's aware of it enough, and she's like, hey, I can't get out of my room, like I'm locked in here or something. My name's Sarah Rainmaker, and I really kept expecting her to show up in like this kind of final battle against Threshold, but it makes sense that she was knocked out with the gas and rounded up with all the other uh students. So
And then Threshold has this weird moment of self-sacrifice. It's like,
yeah,
now that I know you're my sister, I'm going to sacrifice myself for you, because
yeah.
even though it doesn't seem like anything life-threatening is happening right at this
It's
moment,
like,
and then he just stands there and then gets crushed by rocks. It's like,
yeah,
what just happened?
like you have powers. You probably could have floated away and saved yourself. And but you know, I don't buy it. I feel like this is I think this was Matthew saying, if I can appear to sacrifice myself and maybe uh be slightly heroic. B, I'll look like I'm dead, so then now I can carry out some, my plans maybe a little bit easier if they think I'm dead. So it's like it's very strategic, I would say. So I don't buy that he's dead, but
Yeah.
we'll find out, I guess, in the sequel. Um, but yeah, I mean, it just really wraps up with the three of them in this like helicopter with Lynch, and he's saying,
With Nick Fury, saying,
yeah, basically,
I'm going to assemble a squad
yeah.
of avenging people. You all have superpowers. You seem to work well together. Let's make a team.
hmm But it's like, and I think at least Roxy and maybe Grunge, or Roxy for sure, they're like, we just want to go home. And Lynch says something like, well, this government agency isn't just going to let you go home. It's like, well, wait a minute. The government isn't who recruited them, right? I thought this was this other program that recruited them, and the government was the one trying to shut them down. So it's like, how are they part of this government, agency still, and that isn't going to let them leave? And it just it's real strange. But it's basically Lynch saying like, no, your asses still belong to me, but it's okay, I'm going to train you now, and we're going to fight the good fight, or whatever he says. So yeah, that's basically where it ends. But yeah, I mean, that's Gen 13, and it was, I don't know, it was odd. I liked a good majority of it. I think, like I said early on, my nitpicks were like the quality of a lot of the voice work. I just didn't think was up to, the standard of like a Batman the animated series, something like that I'm kind of used to, or kind of comparing it to, like we talked about. So it falls
Mhm.
short of that for sure.
Yeah, I think it definitely has a problem of, I'm not sure what
Yeah,
audience this would have been marketed for.
right. I guess just at that general like comic book reading audience of they're probably directing it at like, well, there's the Gen 13 comic is pretty wildly successful, so maybe we'll just point it at them. So I guess if that's their audience, I mean, it's not a wide audience, it's not general audiences for sure. Because I could easily see, if this thing had gone to wide release and video, and some family like, oh, let's get whatever this new animated release is, that'll the kids can watch that while mom and dad watch this later, and you put this on and let the kids watch it. It's like what are you doing? um
Yeah, it's like early on with the DC animation, and you'll find
yeah.
like Batman under the Red Hood in
Oh yeah.
in the children's section.
Well, let's kick into the most heroic and most villainous segment, and let's start with most villainous.
This planet, these people, they are nothing to me.
You were made to be ruled.
The universe's power! Pure, unstoppable power!
Come to me, son of Jor-El! Kneel before Zod!
And I am that force! I am that power!
In the end, you will always kneel.
Kneel before your master!
What would you say is the most villainous moment?
I mean,
in
that's
this?
pretty easy. It's really the Akira head exploding moment.
Yeah, fair enough. And that is a gorgeous moment. I went with just the overall like watching this movie and coming to the end of it, and it's like, oh yeah, you're still trapped in this kind of government agency, you work for us kind of thing. Your freedom is non-existent. Like from the start, I never got a good sense of like there's no good guys in this movie. I mean, this team of young teens, like they are the good guys. Lynch is a good enough guy, but I still feel like they all work for bad guys. It never seemed like there's a good side to any of this. So I think my overall like villainous is just this, whatever this like government is that is like,
Yeah, it's almost like
allowing
secret
this
government infighting.
Yeah, it was, so that's where I'm going with that. So, and how about most heroic?
I believe there's a hero in all of us
I just finally know what I have to do.
that keeps us honest,
I'm here to fight for truth and justice in the American way.
gives us strength,
You will give the people of Earth an ideal to strive towards.
makes us noble.
And I know in my heart that it's right.
For most heroic, I think I'll go all the way back to the beginning and Caitlin just owning her professor.
Nice. Yeah, because really, I mean, if that guy would do a better job educating, that's where the real battle and knowing is
And I
half
think
the
that's
battle,
like
so.
yeah, and I think that's a great moment of just showing
Yeah,
how smart she is too, like in a very quick way too.
For sure. Yeah. That's great. I think mine is I was really glad when for sure when Grunge and Freefall get their powers, but especially when Roxy takes on Matthew and holds her own and is able to sort of use her gravity powers against Matthew, and it kind of turns the tide of that battle. It's kind of the start of that team up of kind of them all using their powers against Threshold. So yeah, I give it to Roxy. And then last thing to do really is come up with a rating and kind of your overall thoughts and overall like what you think about it. So
Sure. I mean, I'm not gonna go out there and say that this is a great movie because it definitely has a lot of flaws in it. It definitely has a lot of weird male gaziness that is borderline pervy, and that just it makes it all feel weird. At times. And we've talked about the voice acting on a lot of it is flat. I think the Roxy and Mark Hamill, of course, are kind of the two, and Cloris Leachman. I think even Cloris Leachman, just because she's doing this German parody accent, I think even that kind of suffers a little bit. But really, just like Mark Hamill and Roxy are kind of the two voice actor standouts that do a great job, and everybody else just kind of falls flat. Like Grunge, Flea is not the best voice actor.
No.
But it does do the action sequences really well. It's a decent origin story. The violence is surprising, but at the same time, I appreciate it. And let's see, do we rate out of 5?
Yeah.
I would give this like a 3 out of 5.
Okay. Right on. Yeah, I mean, overall, like, it feels like a lot of things, I obviously talked about things that this movie feels like. Some things that I may not have mentioned was like I got an overall, like, the Generation X TV movie that Fox did. Like, there were certain moments of that was like, oh yeah, there's like teens and they're like not sure who they're, who's training them, and it's a lot of like, suspense with that and everything. Just that kind of element of these young kind of characters learning who they are and their powers and everything. But like I mentioned, the Akira-ness of it, and just the X-Men vibes from it, and it's all like that all works. Like, I like that it feels like some of these other things. But like I can't imagine ever watching this again, but I'm glad I did, because I was overall like really impressed by the animation of it. The action scenes, are really good. And did find myself like I really actually would like to know what happens next, because they establish that the villains make off with all the kids. So I don't know what happens next in terms of that. And this may lead me to reading some Gen 13 comics, because I'm guessing that I would guess that this movie is probably pretty loosely or maybe closely based on the first kind of, story arc of the comics. So if that's the case, then maybe whatever happens next is like the next arc of the comics. So I might actually read some Gen 13 and hopefully get a little resolution to like what was established here, because I kind of wish this, had been like a TV pilot that went to a series or something.
Or
Because
even just like like an animated home video release
yeah,
trilogy.
yeah, something. Yeah. So it's like I'm intrigued enough to want to know more. So I may delve into some Gen 13, and yeah, maybe I'll report back with what I find. But I would put this at a 2. I did enjoy it, but again, like there's, I don't know that it's doing anything better than anything we talked about. So, but not bad overall. We give it a 2.5 overall. So, right there in the middle, pretty good. But, yeah. So, Bubbawheat, why don't you talk about all your stuff? I know you got Fight Club Minute coming up. I've been fortunate enough to have already done some guest minutes with you for that. I know that launches pretty soon, so let me talk about that.
That's launch. Well, technically, we have the introductory episode is out already. We released that way early, but we actually start getting into minutes of the movie starting the first Monday in October, and we are releasing 3 days a week: Monday, Wednesday, Friday. A new guest every week. It's we're like recording, we're like 12, 13 weeks in at this point, and it's been a lot of fun. I've really been enjoying doing the full on minute by minute format, because my other podcast is It's Time to Rewind, and that one I've been doing scene by scene, so that kind of varies. You can get a scene that's a couple minutes long, and you can get a scene that's like 10 to 15 minutes long.
Yeah,
it just really varies.
On that one, are you still doing Memento?
As of this recording, we just wrapped up Memento.
Okay.
That was 45 episodes.
Okay.
And
what was the sort of episode mechanic that you were doing there? It was something different. Like,
yeah, from Memento, I mean, we did do scene by scene. And of course the movie jumps back and forth between the color scenes and the black and white scenes. And I had a co-host, Lisa Leahy. She joined me for all the black and white scenes. and Eric Deutsch joined me for all the color scenes. And then we also had a guest for most of the other scenes, except for like the first and the last two, was just the three of us.
Okay.
And we also, for episode 42, we managed to get an interview with Stephen Tobolowsky, who plays Sammy Jenkins.
Nice.
And that was incredible. He is a fantastic storyteller.
Yeah.
And he even had pneumonia on the day, and he talked to us for just over an hour. And
nice.
So that was incredible. He has so many great stories. And then after that, I'm kind of doing like almost like a hiatus season where I'm just kind of taking it easy. And of course, spinning off of Memento, I'm doing 50 First Dates.
Okay.
And I'm doing that one date at a time. And so that'll be 20 episodes. Well, I think 21 episodes, because there's 2 like pre-date episodes, and then there's actually 19 first dates.
Okay.
That Adam Sandler has with Drew Barrymore. And that is going to be releasing weekly on Tuesdays.
Right on. But yeah, I mean, thank you for joining on this and actually bringing this movie sort of to our attention. We definitely would have passed this one over, but I'm glad we looked at it. So
yeah, I mean, I could tell you, a dozen other superhero movies that you've never heard of.
Sure.
But I just because this one has such a fascinating backstory and such an interesting pedigree, I just I am glad that I got the chance to talk about it, because it's just so fascinating to me that it's just such this weird oddity that exists that few people know about.
Yeah, it is bizarre that you could be producing a movie and then the owner of that company sells to another company. It's like, well, isn't somehow all of your business dealings, don't they get like some say in who you're selling? Like, it is bizarre. It is.
And then they decide to do a $90 million tax write-off.
Yeah. Oh man.
Except in that case, they're not allowed to release it in any way, shape, or form.
Well, shame on them. But I mean, see, this will be coming out in a few weeks, so there's still time to we should be like Movies by Minutes Indie is fast approaching, so there's still time if you're in the Indianapolis area to get tickets to that. Spend a day with several of us podcasters having fun. And you're gonna be there, aren't you?
Yeah, I
thought so. Yeah,
I took some time off, and I'm going to be driving up there.
Right on. So yeah, come and talk about Gen 13 with Bubbawheat and I. But yeah, that's coming up. Tickets, like links to that, will be in the show notes. And then, I'm working on Minute of Thieves still, and I'm putting out a few, of course. The last episode here, we talked about The Mask of Zorro, which was a crossover episode with my Minute of Thieves Road to Sherwood miniseries. So more of that is on the way. But I think that's going to do it for this episode. Bubbawheat, thank you for joining again. And until next time, stay safe out there, citizens.
Peel, doctor, atomic scientist, poet.
How now, brown cow?
Meteorologist, physicist, marksman.
Are you paying attention?
John Steed, agent, member of secret elite intelligence arm, traditional.
Good morning, Constable.
Stylish, reserved, lethal.
Dr. Peel, I presume.
Please, don't get up.
I wasn't going to. I was about to throw in the towel.
Extraordinary crimes against the people and the state must be avenged by agents extraordinary.
Time and place for everything.
Quite.
If we still have an enemy.
Now is the winter of your discontent. The weather is no longer in God's hands, but in mine. Hundreds of millions will die. They'll drown, burn, freeze. And this is merely the beginning. Let our revels begin.
After tea.
Of course. John Steed.
You'll pay for that.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Find the show on Facebook and Twitter at Real Comic Heroes. All music and audio are the property of their respective creators.